Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Sarah Montague. The pictures are chilling. People in the German city of Chemnitz giving Nazi salutes. They were among thousands who took to the streets to demonstrate against immigrants after an Iraqi and a Syrian were arrested following a fatal stabbing. Some of the protesters chased down people they believed were immigrants. All this as politicians struggle to agree how to handle the migrant crisis in Europe. My guest on Hard Talk is the German MEP David McAllister, who chairs the European Parliament's Committee on Foreign Affairs. Have European leaders ignored the threat from the far right for too long? David McAllister, welcome to Hard Talk.
A welcome from Brussels.
Did you think that you would ever see people giving Nazi salutes on the streets of Germany again?
The latest events in Chemnitz are appalling, very completely unacceptable. We in Germany have the rule of law. The police and the state prosecutors are responsible for investigating crimes and for defending citizens, but this is certainly not the right of individual citizens or even gangs of right-wing populist activists. And I must say, I'm very annoyed what I had to see in Chemnitz for the last 2 days.
How big a problem do you think the extreme right-wing is in Germany?
Well, at the last federal elections in Germany, for the first time, we had a far-right populist party enter the German Bundestag, join our parliament. They are the strongest opposition force. But on the other hand, this meant that more than 85% of Germans didn't vote for radical right-wing parties. We have to take the concerns of our citizens seriously, but we also have to make clear that the Alternative für Deutschland is giving very simple answers to very complex questions, and that we will not accept the German Bundestag to become a place of hatred, racism, or xenophobia.
But this is what we saw in Chemnitz was not the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD, which has become very popular. This was something different, wasn't it?
Well, in Chemnitz, we had a neo-Nazi activist organizing these demonstrations in the Saxon city of Chemnitz. They were using the special situation after the murder of a German citizen and 2 suspects being arrested. But we have to make very clear that to show neo-Nazi symbols, to show Nazi symbols in Germany, to salute with the Hitler salute, this is all legally forbidden, and we call on the police and the state prosecutors to thoroughly go against this. We will not accept this kind of behavior on German territory.
But what about the underlying concerns? Because there are already laws that it is illegal to give a Nazi salute in Germany. But what about the underlying concerns of those people who were on the streets? What needs to be done about that?
The murder of the family father in Chemnitz was appalling. It's a tragedy. This has to be investigated thoroughly, and this will be investigated by the police and the state prosecutors. 2 suspects have been arrested, as you pointed out. But we have the rule of law, and we must make clear that a crime of individual citizens gives nobody the right to organize a kind of a scapegoat that all migrants in Germany are criminal. This is very dangerous for the cohesion of our society, and I think it's really time that even more people stood up in Chemnitz and said, we say no to this kind of neo-Nazi propaganda.
But the reason that people took to the streets in Chemnitz, and when I ask you about it, you refer to the AfD and the rise in support for that party, are both happening because of immigration in Germany?
Well, the Alternative für Deutschland and the other far-right parties in Germany are single-issue parties. They are only concentrating on the issue of migration. And they are still trying to exploit the very unique situation in 2015 when hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers, refugees and other migrants came to Germany. Since then, the German government and the German parliament have worked very hard to limit the numbers of migrants coming to Germany and to better control and organize the migration system. So we're working hard on this. I take the concerns of citizens seriously, what effects mass migration can have on a society and on the economy. But on the other hand, I'm also very clear that I won't accept right-wing populists playing upon people's fears and giving very simplistic answers to very complex questions. And the best way to tackle these far right-wing populists, in Germany at least, is if you go into a debate with proper and decent arguments, and then you can show that they don't have much to offer in the long run. But in the meantime, we will have to accept that the AfD is entering the regional parliaments, is in the German Bundestag, but I still believe the German Bundestag would be a better place without an Alternative für Deutschland parliamentary group.
But is it also, as part of your defence, if you are to challenge the rise of the far right, is it also important for your party to suggest, to accept that it was a mistake to have so many migrants come to Germany, more than 1.6 million since 2014?
If you remember what happened in 2015, the situation was that 1 million people were on their way from the Middle and Far East and from Northern Africa through Turkey and the Balkans towards Northern Europe. So the whole narrative of the AfD that the German government invited hundreds of thousands of migrants to come to Germany isn't true. They were on their way. And what we decided in 2015 was to avoid a humanitarian catastrophe in the Balkans if we had shut down our borders. We all knew this would be very, very challenging, and we're still working very hard to cope with the situation. But since then, we've moved forward. We now have 2018 and the numbers have gone down. We have worked hard on cooperating better with our partner countries in Northern Africa, in the Middle East, and especially the agreement with Turkey was crucial to stop so many illegal or irregular migrants coming through Greece to Northern Europe. So we are working hard on this, and we will continue to do so.
But you know that the Hungarian Prime Minister, for example, Viktor Orban, has said this summer, he told a German newspaper, if I made a refugee policy like your Chancellor, people would chase me out of office the same day. And in a sense, isn't that what is happening in Germany, only more slowly?
No, I don't agree. The far right is still a small minority in the political landscape of Germany. Parties which are in general in favor of open borders and an open, multicultural, tolerant society got a huge majority at the last general elections. Mr. Orban has his views, we have other views. But what we have to do is to understand that the migration challenge can only be solved at a European level, much better than at a national level. And what we have to do is to increase our efforts to better protect our joint European outer borders, and we have to do much more to help those countries where the migrants are coming from, especially with Africa. That's why I'm very much in favor of a Marshall Plan for Africa.
But before we talk about the migration issue outside Germany, within Germany's own borders, you have a colleague of yours, your party's General Secretary, Annegret Kramp-Caren Bauer, suggesting that there should be a compulsory national service for all young people and migrants, suggesting that would help to integrate them into society, and it would also increase acceptance of refugees among the population. Do you agree with that?
Well, first of all, we have to differentiate between those coming to Germany seeking for asylum who are actually refugees. Here we have a humanitarian responsibility to protect them from harm as long as they can't go back to their home countries. And on the other hand, we have to open certain channels for economic migrants, for people who want to come to Germany to work, and we are still dependent on qualified people coming to match the demands of our very complex labour market. Now, the question is, how can you integrate people better into Germany's society, who have come from other parts of the world and want to stay in Germany. And we say it's important that people are educated, that they go to school, that they learn our rather complicated language, and that the best way to integrate people is, of course, when they are grown up, that they find work. Because if you work, you have your own money, you're able to organize your family. So it's education, language, and work. That is important. And in the end, of course, we want migrants to say yes to Germany, and we want to welcome migrants, saying that Germany is now our new home country, but we also share values in this country: democracy, the rule of law, religious tolerance, or the equality of men and women. These are very important values for us in Germany.
You didn't answer my particular question.
If you come to Germany, we also expect you...
You didn't answer my particular question, which was about the proposal for a compulsory national service from your colleague. Is that something that your party, your government, should be considering?
Well, there's a debate in Germany, started by our Secretary-General, Annegret Kramp-Caren Bauer, if we should have a general year for all German citizens to do something for the whole society. It could be in the military, it could be in social organizations, it could be in other places. And this could, of course, include then those who are not German citizens. Once again, I think what we need in Germany is a debate how to better integrate those people who are coming abroad, and also a debate what we can do to convince young people that it's worth working 1 year for German society in total.
So given what you're saying and the need for migrants, are you disappointed with the way the Italians have reacted? The new government, we have the Interior Minister, Matteo Salvini, in saying that Italy won't take one more refugee because his country won't become a holding pen for all of Europe.
First of all, I have to take every Italian government as it is, and we have to respect the political decisions of an Italian government, but we have to also make clear that we have certain European rules, we have certain European values, and this is what makes us so unique in the European Union. I completely understand that Mediterranean countries like Italy, like Malta, like Greece, like Spain, are sharing more of the burden than other countries, and that's why the system in Europe must be that other countries show more solidarity with our South European partners. And that is the whole debate we are having, that in good and in bad times you have to show solidarity among the member states. But one thing is also clear. There is an obligation to save those people, to rescue those people when they are risking their lives in the Mediterranean.
But when you see what's happening, whether it's in Chemnitz or in Italy, or indeed the Brexit vote, which we'll come on to in a minute, can you say that EU policy on migration is working?
We have to improve our EU migration policy. Of course, things must be better, must get better, but the solution for the migration challenge must be found at a European level, and that's why we have to strengthen our European external borders. I believe that in some years' time we'll have a European border guard and a European coast guard, because we must understand, if we want to keep and maintain the concept of a borderless Europe within the Schengen area, our external borders are now our joint external borders. I believe in the concept of a borderless Europe. I love being able to travel from Germany to the Netherlands or France without having to show my passport.
You are losing the argument at the moment, aren't you? I mean, you look at what is happening as a result of migration policy. That argument is being lost.
No, it isn't being lost. We have to convince people that the migration challenge can only be solved at a European level, that we have to limit the numbers of people coming, we have to control and steer the whole process better. And that means that apart from strengthening our European border protection, we have to support transit countries, we have to support the countries of origin, and we have to fight and break the business model of the traffickers and smugglers who are putting people on boats, getting a lot of money, and then they can decide who can come to Europe or not. That means we will have to invest much more than we have done in the last years and decades. For instance, in Africa, our future in Europe is closely linked to the future of the African continent. That's why we need an Africa policy at eye level with the African states, which better coordinates our foreign policy, our foreign trade policy, our development aid policy and our neighbourhood policy in the European Union.
I want to turn to Brexit, of course, which was partly driven by immigration concerns. We're in a situation now where the UK leaves the EU in the end of March next year. And as the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, said, I think the risk of a no-deal Brexit has been increasing recently. Is he right?
Well, I'm actually still optimistic that we will find a solution which guarantees an orderly withdrawal of the UK from the European Union. A no-deal Brexit would be the worst scenario possible, but of course both sides have to prepare for this possible outcome. But it would be definitely better that we find a solution, that we get it done in an orderly manner, and this should be done latest end of October, beginning of November, because we still need time to get an agreement in the European Parliament, the UK Parliament, and in the national governments until the end of March.
Indeed, both the Foreign Secretary and the International Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, have said the intransigence of the Commission is pushing us towards no deal. Do you have some sympathy with the British position?
I deeply regret that the UK is leaving the European Union, and I wish the referendum would have had a different outcome. But I have to accept that leave obviously means leave. Now, if you leave the European Union, if you decide to leave the European Union, that's your choice. And we also accept the red lines the British government has drawn: no to the single market, no to a customs union. But given that, we now have a certain framework where we can operate, and we want to get this orderly Brexit deal done. And in the end, this means that both sides will have to show a compromise. But one thing is clear: a country that leaves the European Union, the single market, can't be in a better position than a country which is a member. This has nothing to do with being nasty. This has nothing to do with, as I often hear in London, there are people in Brussels interested in punishing the UK. No, it's our interest to get this deal done just as much as the UK side, and that's why we should concentrate on the work we still have to do. 80% of the British withdrawal agreement have now been probably concluded, but that leaves 20%. We're still not there yet.
Also,
that's why the next 2.5 months
on the
will
table
be crucial.
From the British government is a deal struck, drawn up at Chequers, called the Chequers Agreement, which involves the idea of having a common rule book between the UK and the EU on certain areas, just in goods and in agri-foods. Do you think a deal, some negotiations, compromises can be made around that paper?
Well, first of all, we welcome that the UK government finally positioned itself with a white paper, and all these British proposals have been thoroughly analysed in Brussels and in the capitals of the member state. In the end, what we will get is a cooperation, a partnership with our neighbour, the United Kingdom, which will consist of 4 pillars: a comprehensive free trade agreement, a closer cooperation on defence and security and foreign affairs, a closer cooperation on judicial and police matters, and other thematic cooperation, including research and education. These are the 4 pillars. This will be the frame of our future relationship, and we will have time during the transitional period to get the details right. But now we have to get the details of the British withdrawal in order.
But in order to get something in place, not to crash out some deal, you're going to need an awful lot more by October, including something along the lines, or perhaps of the Chequers deal, the idea of a common rule book on goods. Do you think a deal can be struck along those lines?
Well, we still have 2.5 months to go, and obviously this is a very crucial phase in which we're in, and I still believe, and I'm not going into detail if this could be a solution or not, but having spoken to leading negotiators of the European Union side in the last few days, I still get a feeling that in Brussels there is a willing, in the end, to find a decent compromise, like you always do in politics.
I want to turn to the question of Iran, which you have spoken very passionately about in the past, before the United States pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. You said it would send the wrong message and it would jeopardize the security of the entire region. We're now in a situation where, yes, the United States has pulled out, but also Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has cast doubt on the idea that Europe could save the nuclear accord in any way at all. Is he right? Is there nothing that you can do now to keep that nuclear deal alive?
First of all, I would once again like to criticize President Trump's decision to leave the nuclear deal with Iran, because this deal doesn't only belong to the United States. It was a hard piece of work of joint, also European diplomacy, and the High Representative and the foreign ministers of Germany, France and the UK, among others, invested a lot of time in finding this solution. And of course, this agreement wasn't ideal. In the end, it was a compromise. And there are many things we should criticize with regard to Iran, especially the destabilizing role in the region and the unacceptable threats towards the existence of Israel, just to name two. But these issues should be dealt with outside the JCPOA and not within. And that's why we as Europeans said we are interested in maintaining.
But we've seen companies, though, pulling out of Iran. British Airways, KLM, Air France, the energy giant Total, Allianz, the Danish tanker Maersk. These are all companies that are pulling out. There is nothing that you can do to keep the deal alive, and that seems to be being recognised by Iran. As the Supreme Leader said, keep contact with the Europeans, but you should give up hope on them over economic issues or the nuclear deal.
Well, a lot of these major companies you mentioned are in a difficult situation because they had to decide to continue their economic cooperation, their business in the United States or in Iran. And of course, many of them will decide then to go on the safe side and turn towards the United States. And we have to accept this decision. It's absolutely understandable. But what the European Union can do is to help those small and medium-sized companies who invested in Iran, and we encouraged them to invest in Iran, and now are facing some economic problems. So I think the European Union should concentrate on the small and medium-sized businesses from Europe operating in Iran, so we can at least continue our economic cooperation there. But the large companies are leaving. That was in the end, to be expected.
Do you think Europe has less power now than it's had in decades?
The European Union is still the strongest economic power in the world. We have the largest single market with now 500 million people. But what we have to understand in Europe is that only together we are strong. Only together we have eyesight with the United States, with Russia or with China. And that's why we have to be strong on external affairs with one position, but on the other hand, we have to invest in the necessary reforms to make our European Union more effective, less bureaucratic, and more competitive. And of course, the transatlantic relations remain enormously important for us, even though in the moment under this president, we do have some different views on important political matters.
David McAllister, thank you for coming on Hard Talk.